They told you the secret of reality was action and hard work. But what if I tell you that Neville whispered of a hidden force called atmosphere, an unseen cloak of feeling that shapes the life you live long before circumstances have a chance to appear? This is how it unfolds, because every mood you allow and every tone you carry in silence becomes the invisible perfume that the subconscious inhales as its command. This is where the illusion deepens, since people imagine words alone create change. But Neville said the subconscious does not respond to hollow sounds, only to the thickened atmosphere of sustained feeling. This is why it matters, for when your inner air is charged with despair, that becomes the law the subconscious obeys and replicates into your world. This is the turning point, because the moment you decide to breathe wealth into your atmosphere, you are no longer waiting for riches, you are living as the wealthy now. This is how the unseen becomes substance, as the subconscious is impressed not by what you think occasionally, but by what you breathe constantly into the field of your being. This is where freedom announces itself, because you discover you do not need to beg for change. You only need to dress the air around you in the colors of abundance. This is how the world becomes porous, for when you step into a room with an atmosphere of wealth, people and opportunities bend unconsciously toward you. This is the revelation that bends destiny, because the subconscious cannot resist the weight of atmosphere. It treats it as fact and builds reality around it. This is why words without atmosphere collapse, because they lack the gravity that tells the subconscious this is already so. This is where the secret grows richer, since Neville never taught to strain for results, but to steep yourself in an atmosphere so convincing that results fall into place without struggle. This is how the hidden force reveals itself, not in sudden miracles alone, but in the gradual shift of how life answers the mood you wear like a second skin. This is where the ordinary dissolves, because the difference between one who tries and one who lives in atmosphere is the difference between shadows and substance. This is the subtle power you have ignored, as atmosphere is the silent language that every person feels but cannot name, and yet it governs their response to you. This is why the subconscious never argues, because it does not analyze the logic of your words. It only drinks the feeling you carry as the very truth of existence. This is where your freedom is found, not in doing more, but in being more, not in chasing money, but in clothing your atmosphere with wealth itself. This is the point of no return, because once you sense that atmosphere is the true creative medium, you can never again accept the lie that effort alone determines your fate. This is where the invisible becomes the architect, silently building bridges, drawing connections, and opening doors that action alone could never push open. This is why Neville called it the key, because atmosphere is the ultimate method of impressing the subconscious without struggle or conflict. This is where the hidden force called atmosphere finally stands revealed, the unseen architect that turns feeling into fate, mood into matter, and inner wealth into outer abundance. Can you imagine discovering that the very air of your inner world is the silent architect of your outer destiny, weaving patterns so subtle you rarely notice until they harden into fact? This is how it unfolds. For atmosphere is not a passing mood, but the dominant climate of your soul, and the subconscious absorbs it as the final word on what is true. This is where the illusion deepens, because many people believe chance or luck dictates outcomes, when in reality it is their atmosphere silently scripting every scene of their lives. This is why it matters, for the subconscious does not argue or negotiate. It accepts the atmosphere as law and produces results in harmony with it. This is the turning point, when you see that your so-called struggles are not against the world, but against the atmosphere of lack you have been carrying without knowing it. This is how it becomes undeniable, because those who radiate certainty find doors swinging open, while those who radiate fear watch doors remain closed. This is where destiny bends, since what you habitually feel becomes the unseen gravity pulling circumstances, people, and opportunities into orbit around you. This is why the wealthy seem to attract wealth endlessly, because their atmosphere tells the subconscious, this is the only state I know. This is how the silent exchange happens. For even strangers feel the charge of your atmosphere, and unconsciously respond to it as if it were visible currency. This is where you understand Neville's brilliance, for he knew that atmosphere was not a poetic metaphor, but the very mechanism of subconscious creation. This is why affirmations often fail, because if the atmosphere remains poisoned with doubt, the words are powerless whispers against a roaring storm. This is how atmosphere reveals itself as king, because it outlasts fleeting thoughts and dominates the subconscious by its constant pressure. This is where the pattern becomes clear. For no one escapes the law that atmosphere impresses the subconscious, and the subconscious externalizes atmosphere. This is why the wise stop fighting the mirror of circumstances, and instead adjust the breath of their inner climate, knowing that change begins invisibly. This is how the power deepens, because once you learn to detect your atmosphere, you realize you are never helpless. You can shift it in an instant, and shift your world with it. This is where hope enters, for nothing is fixed when atmosphere can be rewritten, and nothing is final when mood can be reclothed in abundance. This is why the teaching is urgent, because the atmosphere you allow today is the world you inherit tomorrow, and delay is simply self-sabotage disguised as patience. This is how the veil is torn, for you see that reality is not created by accident, but by the air of your spirit, which your subconscious breathes without question. This is where the revelation becomes personal, because now you know that shaping your atmosphere is shaping your destiny, and that destiny is already bending in your favor. This is why atmosphere shapes reality, because the unseen climate of your being is the scriptwriter behind every scene, the painter behind every picture, and the lawgiver behind every event of your life. Picture for a moment the idea that wealth is not first coins in your hand or numbers in a bank, but a radiant atmosphere that clings to you like light clings to the sun, impossible to hide and impossible to fake. This is how it unfolds. For Neville revealed that the aura of wealth is not about possessions, but about the feeling of being wealthy so completely that it saturates every breath you take. This is where the illusion deepens, because society teaches you to wait for money to arrive before you dare to feel rich. Yet Neville insisted you must feel rich first for money to find its way. This is why it matters, because the subconscious does not check your bank statement. It only registers the climate you carry as your permanent identity. This is the turning point. Since once you cultivate an aura of wealth, people, opportunities, and even events begin aligning as if magnetized by your invisible field. This is how the aura speaks, silently commanding respect, opening doors, and creating momentum, without you uttering a word of effortful persuasion. This is where power whispers, because while others scramble and strain, the one who lives in a wealth aura seems to glide through corridors already unlocked for them. This is why the aura becomes destiny, for the subconscious, convinced of your wealth, will not rest until your world reflects the inner atmosphere it already believes to be fact. This is how the wealth aura begins, small, has a faint sense of sufficiency in your heart, but over time it thickens into a tangible field others can feel when you enter the room. This is where you begin to see miracles, not as interruptions of natural law, but as natural consequences of the law of atmosphere in action. This is why Neville called feeling the secret, because the wealth aura is nothing but feeling crystallized into atmosphere, and atmosphere hardened into circumstance. This is how the ordinary dissolves, because you are no longer waiting to be chosen or rescued. You radiate wealth, and the world cannot help but choose you. This is where resistance collapses, since when you wear the wealth aura, even your subconscious objections dissolve, unable to fight against the dominant climate of abundance. This is why imitation fails, for you cannot trick the subconscious with surface gestures. The aura must be real, born of sustained inner acceptance, not shallow play acting. This is how it grows undeniable, because your habits, your posture, your very tone of voice begin to echo the atmosphere you have chosen, until all of life echoes back. This is where wealth ceases to be a chase and becomes a reflection, a mirror of the aura you have clothed yourself in night after night, thought after thought, mood after mood. This is why those who seem naturally wealthy never lose it, because the aura that created it remains, ensuring their subconscious continues to reproduce the same results. This is how you begin to walk differently, Not because you pretend, but because you cannot help but embody the new climate that has taken root inside you. This is where the true secret is revealed. For wealth is never gained. It is expressed outward from an aura that was cultivated inward until the subconscious sealed it as law. This is why Neville's wealth aura concept is the missing link for so many seekers. Because once you embody it, you are no longer chasing money. You are becoming the source of it. Now consider this. The world is filled with people chanting affirmations with desperate hope, yet their lives remain unchanged, because the atmosphere behind their words tells a completely different story. This is how it unfolds, for you can repeat, "I am wealthy," 1,000 times a day, but if the atmosphere you breathe is drenched in lack, the subconscious hears only poverty. This is where the illusion deepens, since words without atmosphere are like paper sails in a storm, fragile, powerless, and quickly torn apart by doubt. This is why it matters, because the subconscious is not impressed by syllables, it is impressed by the sustained mood that makes those words alive or empty. This is the turning point, when you realize that affirmations are not the engine of change, but merely the decorations on the atmosphere that is already in command. This is how the truth cuts deeper, for Neville never dismissed affirmations, but insisted they must be clothed in feeling, and that feeling is the atmosphere the subconscious obeys. This is where many fail, endlessly repeating positive statements while radiating fear, wondering why nothing shifts, when the problem is not the words, but the air of the spirit. This is why atmosphere dominates, because even silence charged with wealth is more powerful than frantic affirmations dripping with worry. This is how the subconscious listens, leaning not to your lips but to your atmosphere, and when it feels abundance there, it immediately begins building in alignment with it. This is where the secret turns practical. For Neville taught that you must marry words with atmosphere, so that every affirmation becomes a living seed planted in fertile ground. This is why repetition without atmosphere is sterile, but repetition clothed in atmosphere is irresistible law. This is how life mirrors the difference, because a person who radiates wealth while saying nothing commands more than one who repeats affirmations while reeking of lack. This is where the subconscious reveals its impartiality, accepting atmosphere as the final decree regardless of the slogans you chant on the surface. This is why the wise choose atmosphere first, then allow affirmations to flow naturally from the climate they have already established within. This is how the balance is restored, for when affirmations rise from atmosphere, they are no longer hollow wishes, but declarations backed by the authority of mood. This is where you see that atmosphere is the soil and affirmations are seeds. And without the right soil, even the strongest seed cannot survive. This is why Neville's teaching feels revolutionary, because it exposes why so many feel frustrated when affirmations fail. Atmosphere was missing all along. This is how the ordinary dissolves, because when atmosphere is right, even a single whispered affirmation can tilt the subconscious into obedience. This is where the choice becomes clear, for you can waste years repeating empty words, or you can shift your atmosphere and let words become living echoes of your new state. This is why atmosphere versus affirmations is no contest, because atmosphere is the master key, and affirmations only gain power when they are born from the aura you carry. Suppose you discover that the subconscious, vast and unyielding, is not swayed by logic, arguments, or even the cleverest affirmations, but bends instantly to the weight of feeling pressed upon it like a seal into wax. This is how it unfolds, because Neville taught that the subconscious is the womb of creation, and like fertile soil, it responds only to the seed of feeling dropped into its depths. This is where the illusion deepens, for people believe thinking harder will convince the subconscious. But thought without feeling is like a seed without water, lifeless and barren. This is why it matters, since every great change you have ever experienced began not with words alone, but with a sensation so strong it impressed itself upon you as reality. This is the turning point, because once you feel wealthy, even in imagination, the subconscious accepts that atmosphere is law, and begins building a world that confirms it. This is how creation becomes effortless, since the subconscious never argues with feeling. It cannot distinguish between what is vividly felt and what is physically lived. This is where the miracle lies, because the very act of steeping yourself in the feeling of wealth is the act of commanding the subconscious to produce it externally. This is why Neville urged you to practice entering states of feeling, not states of endless reasoning, where feeling is the only true language the subconscious obeys. This is how your atmosphere thickens, as each repeated moment of felt abundance deepens into the subconscious until it cannot help but externalize it. This is where the subtle difference appears, because the one who imagines wealth without feeling gets nothing, while the one who imagines and feels wealth moves mountains unseen. This is why the subconscious is described as impersonal, because it does not weigh morality or logic. It simply takes the impression and produces according to its weight. This is how your destiny turns, because when you master the art of feeling, you master the subconscious. And when you master the subconscious, you master the stage of life itself. This is where the frustration of countless seekers dissolves, for they realize it was not a lack of effort, but a lack of feeling that delayed their manifestation. This is why Neville said feeling is the secret, because nothing else leaves a lasting mark upon the subconscious as deeply or as quickly. This is how to wield it, by surrendering into the sensation of already being what you wish to be, allowing that state to saturate your inner world until it feels natural. This is where resistance collapses, since the subconscious cannot resist what feels normal. It rushes to produce outwardly what you have normalized inwardly. This is why atmosphere and feeling are inseparable, for atmosphere is simply feeling expanded into a climate the subconscious accepts as home. This is how your future is written, not by effortful struggle, but by impressing your subconscious with the steady beat of chosen feelings until they solidify into fact. This is where the veil lifts, because you see that creation was never about forcing the world, but about impressing the subconscious. And once impressed, the world bends to serve the image held within. This is why impressing the subconscious through feeling is the heart of Neville's teaching, the doorway to wealth, the bridge to freedom, and the master key to all transformation. Envision a world where every emotion you carry speaks louder than words, where the very air around you vibrates with the unspoken language of your inner state, and everyone, consciously or unconsciously, reads it like an open book. This is how it unfolds, because Neville taught that mood is the dialect of the subconscious, the invisible signal that commands life to conform to what it senses within you. This is where the illusion deepens, for most believe communication happens through speech or logic, yet the subconscious, and even those around you, react first to the tone, the energy, the quiet insistence of your being. This is why it matters, as your dominant mood is silently programming your reality, shaping circumstances, and influencing how others behave toward you without a single command being uttered. This is the turning point, because when you begin to control your mood deliberately, you are effectively speaking directly to the subconscious, instructing it to construct the life you desire. This is how influence manifests, since the atmosphere you exude is interpreted as fact, and the world responds as though you are already the embodiment of your inner state. This is where perception transforms into reality, because others mirror your mood unconsciously, and the subconscious aligns circumstances to the tone you maintain. This is why silent mood is more persuasive than argument, more magnetic than speech, and more potent than any logical plan, for it bypasses resistance and implants belief directly into the field of the subconscious. This is how subtle power works, as a single, consistent mood of wealth, ease, and sufficiency can shift entire environments in your favor. This is where mastery becomes visible, because those who learn the silent language of mood can orchestrate outcomes effortlessly, as the world bends to the gravity of their inner climate. This is why the ordinary fails, for most drift in reactive moods, letting fear, doubt, or scarcity dictate the messages their subconscious broadcasts to life. This is how the extraordinary arises, as conscious mood management transforms passive moments into active creation, impressing the subconscious at every turn. This is where the law of resonance asserts itself, because what you radiate internally is what life reflects externally, and no contradiction can survive sustained mood. This is why Neville emphasized the invisible over the visible, the unspoken over the spoken, and the felt over the thought, because this is the language the subconscious understands best. This is how alignment is achieved, when your inner mood matches your desired outcome so completely that reality has no choice but to follow. This is where confidence becomes second nature. For once you command your mood, you command the world's response without struggle or coercion. This is why silent mood is a force to be reckoned with, capable of bypassing obstacles, shaping events, and magnetizing people and opportunities toward you. This is how subtlety becomes strength, as the subconscious obeys the unspoken directives of your atmosphere before you even articulate a plan. This is where true influence originates, because the silent language of mood impresses reality with the undeniable authority of a life already lived in the state you choose. This is why learning to speak through mood is a cornerstone of Neville's atmosphere technique, the unseen conduit through which wealth, freedom, and abundance flow effortlessly into your life. Think of the moment when you enter a room and instantly change the energy without saying a word. When people lean in or step back, simply because of the atmosphere you radiate, and realize this is the invisible power Neville spoke of. This is how it unfolds, because your inner state, whether charged with confidence, abundance, or ease, projects outward and subtly orchestrates reactions and interactions around you. This is where the illusion deepens. For most people, believe influence comes from charisma, authority, or charm. Yet it is the unspoken atmosphere that does the heavy lifting, silently shifting the behavior of everyone present. This is why it matters, because in daily life, small shifts in mood and presence can ripple outward, creating opportunities, alliances, and unexpected advantages without conscious effort. This is the turning point, when you notice that a person who walks in radiating ease can calm chaos, attract attention, and make doors open that others struggle to push open through action alone. This is how subtle power manifests, because your atmosphere is the unacknowledged currency that buys influence, shapes perception, and magnetizes alignment with your intentions. This is where ordinary moments become transformational, as a simple smile, posture, or calm breath, when carried in a wealthy atmosphere, transmits far beyond words, creating shifts that compound over time. This is why the subconscious and the outer world respond in harmony, for they register your dominant mood as fact and adjust circumstances accordingly. This is how presence becomes a tool, a live demonstration of Neville's principle that you do not need to act or plead for life's favor. You need only radiate the state you wish to inhabit. This is where mastery appears deceptively simple, because those who understand atmosphere can orchestrate outcomes while appearing passive, effortless, or natural. This is why habitual moods determine habitual results, for the subconscious continually reinforces what feels consistent, embedding your inner climate into life itself. This is how your day-to-day environment becomes a mirror, reflecting back the atmosphere you cultivate with each interaction, thought, and silent vibration of feeling. This is where awareness becomes vital, because without noticing the mood you carry, the subconscious will default to the atmosphere you unconsciously nurture, whether beneficial or limiting. This is why subtle shifts, like grounding yourself in abundance before a meeting or radiating confidence during a conversation, are potent tools for manifestation. This is how influence multiplies invisibly, because each action harmonized with your desired atmosphere compounds, creating a cumulative effect far beyond immediate perception. This is where ordinary presence turns into a magnet for opportunity, recognition, and prosperity, as others unconsciously gravitate toward the aura you project. This is why Neville emphasized living as if, because by embedding yourself in the atmosphere of your desired reality, you shortcut resistance and accelerate alignment. This is how life begins to flow, as even the mundane becomes fertile ground for manifestation when approached from the vantage of cultivated atmosphere. This is where everyday life transforms into a theater of abundance, because each encounter, conversation, and gesture carries the imprint of your inner wealth, bending the world toward your chosen reality. Ask yourself, what happens when you pause and feel the invisible tones surrounding you? When you notice the subtle currents of mood that flow through your thoughts, your body, and your interactions, and realize these currents are the language of your subconscious. This is how it unfolds. Because Neville taught that awareness of your atmosphere is the first step toward mastery, for you cannot change what you do not perceive. This is where the illusion deepens, since most people are blind to the dominant climate they project, believing it to be neutral or inconsequential, while it quietly shapes every outcome around them. This is why it matters, because detecting your current atmosphere allows you to see the subtle blocks and unconscious beliefs that have been controlling your reality from behind the scenes. This is the turning point, when you realize that noticing tension, doubt, or scarcity within yourself is not failure, but an opportunity to intervene and shift the air before it hardens into circumstance. This is how subtle calibration works, as observing your mood, reactions, and habitual responses creates a mirror in which the subconscious can be intentionally redirected. This is where the power of honesty becomes clear. For confronting the truth of your inner climate, even when uncomfortable, gives you the leverage to rewrite it consciously and deliberately. This is why Neville emphasized self-awareness, because the subconscious cannot adjust what is invisible, and only when you bring the hidden atmosphere into light can transformation begin. This is how the skill of detection grows, by pausing in daily moments to ask, what am I projecting right now, and is this the climate that will create the life I desire? This is where habitual monitoring becomes magic, as repeated checks on your inner state allow you to catch and correct drift towards scarcity, fear, or doubt before it takes root. This is why even minor adjustments matter, for a shift in mood, posture, or thought can ripple outward, realigning both your subconscious and your environment. This is how you start to read reality differently, noticing the correlation between your inner atmosphere and the reactions, doors, and opportunities that manifest around you. This is where accountability meets power, because recognizing your current state means you are no longer a passive participant. You are the conductor of your own symphony. This is why subtle cues like breath, tension, and emotional undertone become diagnostic tools for the inner climate that governs outer outcomes. This is how awareness evolves into skill, as repeated observation allows you to sense, correct, and optimize your atmosphere before any external event occurs. This is where mastery begins, because once you can detect your prevailing mood and its effect, you can begin to impress the subconscious deliberately rather than reactively. This is why Neville's principle is revolutionary, as it transforms passive reflection into active creation, turning perception into a tool of power. This is how you cultivate the discipline of inner observation, training yourself to notice the invisible currents that dictate life's unfolding. This is where your journey deepens, because by detecting your current atmosphere, you gain the first foothold on the climb toward a consciously designed, wealthy, and abundant life. Envision a quiet moment, perhaps just before sleep or during a pause in your day, where you deliberately step into a state of imagined wealth, allowing every fiber of your being to feel the abundance as though it is already present, and realize this is the heart of Neville's atmosphere exercise. This is how it unfolds, because the exercise is not about pretending superficially, but about saturating your inner world with the feeling that wealth, success, and freedom are already yours. This is where the illusion deepens, as most think imagining a scenario is enough. Yet Neville taught that it is the atmosphere, the charged, sustained feeling, that truly impresses the subconscious and triggers manifestation. This is why it matters, because the subconscious registers reality through feeling, and by living in the sensation of already having what you desire, you prime it to create external confirmation. This is the turning point, since consistent immersion in this feeling state allows the subconscious to accept it as absolute truth, and life begins to respond as naturally as water flowing to its level. This is how the exercise transforms ordinary imagination into a creative tool of immense power, converting thought into the invisible architecture of reality. This is where subtlety proves essential, for it is not the dramatics of visualization, but the calm, pervasive presence of the feeling that solidifies the atmosphere of wealth. This is why repetition matters, because each return to the exercise deepens the imprint on the subconscious, reinforcing a new climate that becomes increasingly dominant in your consciousness. This is how momentum builds, as the feelings cultivated during these exercises spill into waking life, influencing decisions, attracting opportunities, and shifting perception in alignment with abundance. This is where your inner world and outer reality converge, because the subconscious, convinced of your already existing wealth, begins orchestrating circumstances to reflect it externally. This is why attention to detail is crucial, as every nuance of thought, posture, and inner dialogue contributes to the richness of the atmosphere you create during the exercise. This is how mastery of the technique accelerates results. For sustained engagement allows the subconscious to internalize not a fleeting wish, but a permanent state of being. This is where the ordinary dissolves, because you are no longer waiting or striving. You are living in the reality you desire, and the world adapts in response. This is why this exercise is more than visualization, for it transforms imagination into felt reality, impressing the subconscious in a way words or logic never can. This is how alignment occurs naturally, as your thoughts, emotions, and energy converge into a singular frequency of abundance that permeates your daily existence. This is where resistance fades, because the subconscious recognizes the state as truth and no longer allows contradiction to interfere with manifestation. This is why Neville emphasized consistency, as the cumulative effect of repeated atmosphere exercises compounds into irreversible shifts in life experience. This is how effortless creation unfolds, as the subconscious now acts as an obedient servant to the mood and feeling you have chosen. This is where transformation is cemented, because the atmosphere cultivated through this exercise becomes the invisible blueprint from which your external reality is constructed. This is why Neville's exercise remains timeless, a direct method to impress the subconscious, craft a wealth aura, and invite life to respond to the invisible climate of your chosen abundance. Picture for a moment the power of moving through your day as if your desires have already been fulfilled, carrying the energy, confidence, and ease of someone who inhabits abundance naturally. And understand, this is the essence of living as if through atmosphere. This is how it unfolds, because when your internal state mirrors the reality you wish to experience, the subconscious has no choice but to align circumstances to match that frequency. This is where the illusion deepens, since most believe acting as if is mere pretense. But Neville taught that when genuine feeling saturates the act, it becomes the language of the subconscious, and life responds accordingly. This is why it matters, because external appearances alone cannot impress the subconscious. The invisible mood, the saturated feeling, is what reshapes reality from the inside out. This is the turning point. For each moment spent living in the atmosphere of your fulfilled desire strengthens the subconscious impression, solidifying belief and accelerating manifestation. This is how subtle transformation occurs, as your thoughts, speech, gestures, and energy all begin to harmonize with the chosen state, producing a coherent aura that magnetizes opportunities and aligns circumstances. This is where ordinary moments become stages for creation, because the consistent internal reality you maintain over time imposes itself upon the external world without resistance. This is why habitual living as if matters, for repetition deepens the impression, turning temporary feelings into permanent atmospheric states that the subconscious treats as fact. This is how effortless momentum emerges, since acting in alignment with the atmosphere of fulfillment reduces friction between intention and external manifestation, making life appear to conspire in your favor. This is where authenticity proves decisive, because the subconscious cannot be fooled by hollow imitation. Only a fully inhabited state of being leaves an imprint it cannot ignore. This is why patience is redefined, for living as if is not waiting for reality to change, but preemptively creating the conditions that ensure change is inevitable. This is how subtle power amplifies, as the more consistently you inhabit the desired atmosphere, the more seamlessly external circumstances adjust to reflect it. This is where confidence becomes intrinsic, because your inner state of fulfillment no longer depends on fluctuating events or validation from others, but radiates as a constant signal to the subconscious. This is why alignment is continuous, since the subconscious mirrors the lived as-if state in every action, decision, and interaction, producing life experiences that feel inevitable. This is how the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary, as every encounter, choice, and opportunity resonates with the invisible frequency of your internally maintained reality. This is where resistance diminishes, for living in the fulfilled atmosphere overrides doubts, fears, and scarcity patterns by establishing a new norm within your subconscious. This is why Neville emphasized atmosphere over mere planning, because when you live as if from the inside out, life is compelled to comply with the internal script. This is how your aura becomes magnetic, influencing people, circumstances, and events effortlessly, as the subconscious recognizes and replicates the dominant state you broadcast. This is where mastery crystallizes, because living as if is no longer a technique, but a natural way of being, an ongoing impressing of the subconscious that ensures your reality reflects the abundant atmosphere you maintain. This is why the practice of as-if, living through atmosphere, is a cornerstone of Neville's teaching, transforming imagination into lived reality and feeling into unshakable manifestation. Consider the possibility that scarcity, fear, and doubt are not just fleeting emotions, but living atmospheres in themselves, shaping your subconscious and commanding the conditions of your life as surely as abundance does. This is how it unfolds, because Neville taught that every dominant mood, whether positive or negative, impresses the subconscious with the authority of truth, and lack is no exception. This is where the illusion deepens, for most people blame external circumstances for their struggles, unaware that the atmosphere they habitually carry is the silent architect of those very struggles. This is why it matters, because recognizing lack as an atmosphere reveals that you are never truly at the mercy of external events. The law of feeling dictates outcomes before any circumstance appears. This is the turning point, as awareness of your scarcity atmosphere is the first step toward neutralizing it and replacing it with a climate of wealth and possibility. This is how subtle oppression operates, for every thought steeped in limitation reinforces the subconscious impression, thickening the fog of lack around your life like an invisible prison. This is where responsibility emerges, because once you see lack as an atmosphere you generate, you realize that the power to change everything lies in consciously cultivating a new climate within yourself. This is why the subconscious cannot distinguish between imagined and actual lack, for the mood carries the same weight whether the scenario is real or rehearsed in thought. This is how liberation begins, by actively observing and interrupting the patterns that reinforce scarcity, breathing instead the atmosphere of abundance and sufficiency. This is where transformation accelerates, as deliberate creation of a wealth-oriented atmosphere begins to displace the old scarcity patterns embedded in the subconscious. This is why every negative thought, worry, or complaint matters, because each one strengthens the invisible architecture of lack that governs external outcomes. This is how subtle shift operates, for even small changes in perception or feeling can gradually tip the balance from limitation to expansion, altering the magnetic field of your inner world. This is where contrast becomes instructive, since experiencing scarcity consciously allows you to identify its structure, tone, and influence, giving you a blueprint for dismantling it. This is why mindfulness is critical, as noticing lack without judgment enables you to neutralize its energy and consciously replace it with the richer, more expansive atmosphere of wealth. This is how mastery over inner states grows, because the subconscious is always listening, absorbing, and replicating the dominant mood you radiate, whether scarcity or abundance. This is where patience merges with power, as consistent cultivation of a new atmosphere eventually overrides the old patterns and solidifies a new subconscious reality. This is why Neville emphasized the invisible over the visible, because the architecture of your experience is laid in atmosphere long before circumstances take form. This is how the invisible chains of lack dissolve, replaced by the magnetism of wealth, confidence, and sufficiency. This is where empowerment crystallizes, for understanding that lack is also an atmosphere gives you direct access to the law of creation and the ability to impress the subconscious deliberately. This is why shifting from scarcity to abundance is not about acquiring external resources first, but about transforming the inner atmosphere that will naturally attract them. Now consider this: the patterns, moods, and atmospheres you have carried for years, those invisible habits that have silently dictated your life, can be consciously dissolved and replaced. And the moment you realize this, freedom begins. This is how it unfolds, because Neville taught that the subconscious responds only to the dominant mood, and old auras of limitation or fear are simply impressions that can be overwritten through deliberate practice and feeling. This is where the illusion deepens, for many feel trapped in circumstance, unaware that their old aura is not fixed, but a learned atmosphere that can be consciously unlearned and replaced. This is why it matters, because liberation is not waiting for circumstances to change. It is creating a new internal climate that the subconscious must obey, regardless of past impressions. This is the turning point, as awareness of your existing aura is the first step toward dismantling it, noticing where tension, scarcity, or doubt has woven itself into your subconscious architecture. This is how subtle liberation occurs, because each moment you deliberately cultivate feelings of abundance, confidence, and ease begins to loosen the grip of the old aura, creating cracks for transformation to seep through. This is where empowerment takes root, as you understand that your inner climate is malleable, that every habit, every thought, and every sustained feeling contributes to either maintaining limitation or forging freedom. This is why conscious practice is critical, because passive awareness alone will not replace the old impressions. The new atmosphere must be actively cultivated and sustained until it dominates. This is how momentum builds, as repeated engagement with the new aura trains the subconscious to accept abundance, health, and success as your natural state, rewriting the patterns that previously dictated lack. This is where resistance fades, because the subconscious recognizes consistent feeling as truth, and the old aura cannot compete with the power of deliberate, emotionally charged new impressions. This is why visualization alone is insufficient, for without saturating it with authentic feeling, the old aura retains its dominance and undermines every attempt at manifestation. This is how subtle mastery develops, by learning to inhabit the new aura, even in small daily moments, testing, adjusting, and reinforcing the desired atmosphere until it becomes second nature. This is where ordinary life transforms, as friends, colleagues, and opportunities respond unconsciously to the invisible signals of your newly cultivated presence. This is why consistency is more powerful than intensity, because the repeated daily choice to maintain a new atmosphere gradually solidifies it as the subconscious default. This is how freedom from the old aura becomes effortless, for the more the subconscious accepts the new climate as permanent, the less influence the old patterns exert on your external world. This is where clarity emerges, because you can distinguish between inherited atmospheres, reactive moods, and consciously chosen states that support your vision. This is why Neville emphasized the inner state over external circumstance, for true change begins in the atmosphere you maintain, not in the conditions you face. This is how transformation becomes irreversible, as the subconscious incorporates the new aura as identity, ensuring all future experiences align with abundance and sufficiency. This is where empowerment reaches its peak, because breaking free from the old aura is not merely a change in feeling, it is a reclamation of the invisible creative power that directs every facet of your life. This is why shifting the aura is the gateway to mastering Neville's atmosphere technique, allowing you to live intentionally, impress the subconscious, and magnetize reality to reflect the life you choose. Envision a moment where you realize that the quickest path to transforming your life is not through endless action, struggle, or persuasion, but through the deliberate cultivation of atmosphere, which acts as a direct line to the subconscious. This is how it unfolds, because Neville revealed that atmosphere is the medium through which the subconscious receives instruction most efficiently, bypassing doubt, resistance, and hesitation. This is where the illusion deepens, where most people labor under the false belief that external effort alone produces results, unaware that the subconscious shapes reality first and foremost according to the dominant mood impressed upon it. This is why it matters, because understanding atmosphere as a shortcut allows you to work smarter, not harder, using feeling as the primary instrument of creation. This is the turning point, as each deliberate adjustment of inner state creates immediate influence over subconscious activity, which then orchestrates circumstances with minimal friction or delay. This is how subtle acceleration occurs, for the subconscious responds instantly to sustained feeling, reorganizing opportunities, people, and events to reflect the new climate. This is where ordinary methods falter, because without atmosphere, every action is a shot in the dark, often producing results at odds with intention. This is why the shortcut works, because atmosphere implants the desired state directly into the subconscious, creating a blueprint for life that unfolds automatically. This is how momentum compounds, as repeated immersion in the chosen atmosphere strengthens the subconscious impression, making manifestation faster, smoother, and more inevitable. This is where the hidden genius of Neville's teaching shines, for he provided a way to bypass struggle by recognizing that life responds not to effort alone, but to the invisible climate you sustain internally. This is why patience becomes strategic, as cultivating atmosphere is not passive waiting but active, intelligent shaping of the subconscious environment that produces reality. This is how leverage emerges, for with a single, consistent feeling state, you can influence multiple areas of life simultaneously, far more effectively than scattered action could ever achieve. This is where the ordinary transforms, because the subconscious treats the sustained atmosphere as fact, and fact, in turn, becomes experience without delay or resistance. This is why subtlety triumphs over force, since the quiet, pervasive presence of the right mood can accomplish what frantic activity never will. This is how mastery unfolds, as each conscious shift in atmosphere teaches the subconscious to align effortlessly, turning invisible work into visible results. This is where confidence solidifies, because you learn that the more faithfully you maintain the chosen atmosphere, the more reliably life mirrors it without struggle or coercion. This is why Neville emphasized feeling and atmosphere over instruction and procedure, because shortcuts work only when they address the root mechanism of creation itself, the subconscious perception of reality. This is how effortless creation becomes possible, as life bends to the sustained climate you maintain, producing external manifestations with a natural ease that feels almost magical. This is where understanding deepens. For atmosphere is not a trick or illusion, but the precise instrument through which the subconscious orchestrates the symphony of your reality. This is why treating atmosphere as a subconscious shortcut is transformative, allowing you to impress your inner world with intention, accelerate results, and create a life that mirrors the abundance you embody. Picture for a moment a canvas within your mind, where imagination paints not just images, but entire climates. And understand that Neville taught this inner theater is the laboratory where atmosphere is born and cultivated. This is how it unfolds, because imagination fuels the feeling of reality, saturating your inner state with the texture, color, and vibration of the life you wish to live before it manifests externally. This is where the illusion deepens, for many treat imagination as fantasy, failing to realize that the subconscious cannot distinguish between vividly felt imagination and real events. It accepts the atmosphere you create as truth. This is why it matters, because by deliberately directing imagination to embody abundance, success, and sufficiency, you shape an atmosphere that impresses the subconscious into aligning life with it. This is the turning point. As imagination becomes more than mental pictures, it becomes a vessel for feeling, a medium through which the subconscious receives its instructions and begins to orchestrate reality accordingly. This is how creation accelerates, because the richer, more detailed, and more emotionally charged the imagination, the more persuasive it is to the subconscious. This is where subtlety gains power, for even imagined scenarios must be infused with the atmosphere of reality. Otherwise, the subconscious disregards them as hollow. This is why the practice is transformative, because through imagination, you can inhabit the state you desire, saturate your aura with it, and allow life to respond to the subconscious impression rather than external circumstance. This is how influence multiplies, since imagination continuously reinforces the atmosphere, subtly altering your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors until they resonate with the internalized state of abundance. This is where ordinary visualization fails, because without feeling and atmospheric richness, the subconscious treats images as optional fiction rather than commanding fact. This is why imagination is essential, for it is the rehearsal room of reality, where the subconscious learns to accept your desired life as normal and inevitable. This is how subtle mastery emerges. As repeated practice of imagination refines the atmosphere, strengthens conviction, and imprints a new dominant mood that drives manifestation effortlessly. This is where ordinary thinking transforms, because imagination integrated with feeling creates an atmosphere powerful enough to override old scarcity patterns and establish new defaults. This is why Neville emphasized imagining the end result, for it allows the subconscious to experience and accept the completed state as already existing. An atmosphere solidifies that experience into reality. This is how belief is strengthened, as imagination married with feeling convinces the subconscious of the inevitability of your desired outcome. This is where alignment becomes visible, for external circumstances begin to mirror the atmosphere created internally through imaginative practice. This is why subtle repetition matters, because each imaginative act reinforces the new climate and further impresses the subconscious, embedding it as dominant state. This is how effortless creation is sustained, since imagination consistently feeds the atmosphere. Maintaining a magnetic aura that attracts and organizes life in accordance with your vision. This is where the unseen begins to act, for imagination, infused with feeling, becomes the architect of your subconscious reality. This is why the role of imagination in atmosphere is indispensable, because it transforms thought into lived feeling, feeling into magnetic aura, and magnetic aura into tangible, abundant life. Can you imagine the rulers, inventors, and visionaries whose presence seemed to command resources, loyalty, and fortune effortlessly, simply because their inner atmosphere radiated confidence, abundance, and inevitability, long before external achievements manifested? This is how it unfolds, because Neville taught that what we see in history as genius, charisma, or luck is often the visible reflection of a carefully cultivated inner climate that impressed the subconscious and shaped circumstances around them. This is where the illusion deepens, for people assume these figures succeeded purely through skill or effort, unaware that the subconscious of their world responded to the invisible aura of their being, bending events to align with it. This is why it matters, because recognizing the role of atmosphere in historical success reveals a universal law accessible to anyone willing to master their internal climate, regardless of starting conditions. This is the turning point, as you see that greatness is not an accident, but the natural outcome of living consistently within a chosen atmosphere that commands reality to follow. This is how subtle influence operates, since the unseen aura of leaders like industrial pioneers, explorers, and artists magnetized collaboration, resources, and opportunities that appeared perfectly timed, yet were guided by internal impression. This is where ordinary observation fails, because the true power of these figures was invisible. They moved as though life conspired with them, yet the secret was the atmosphere they sustained within themselves. This is why the subconscious of others is critical, as every human and environment unconsciously responds to dominant internal climates, creating ripples that manifest as influence, fortune, and success. This is how patterns repeat, because history is full of individuals who impressed the collective subconscious with the aura of inevitability, demonstrating that internal state precedes and shapes external outcome. This is where the practical lesson emerges, for you can study these figures not only for strategy or innovation, but for the consistent quality of feeling they maintained that attracted alignment and opportunity. This is why replication matters, because by cultivating your own wealth atmosphere, you engage the same invisible mechanism these historical figures used to shape their reality and outcomes. This is how subtle mastery appears, as the deliberate creation of internal climate can produce results as powerful as talent, resources, or luck alone. This is where ordinary effort is eclipsed, for those who understand and maintain their atmosphere move through resistance effortlessly, magnetizing support and opportunity with minimal struggle. This is why Neville emphasized feeling over visible evidence, because historical examples show that the invisible climate was the engine behind apparent success and fortune. This is how recognition emerges, as environments, colleagues, and circumstances respond not to commands, but to the unspoken authority of internal state. producing alignment that seems miraculous but is entirely natural. This is where empowerment crystallizes, because if historical figures could harness atmosphere to shape life, so can anyone willing to practice the same principle consciously and persistently. This is why the subconscious is key, for it interprets atmosphere as truth and organizes external reality accordingly, regardless of external appearances or current limitations. This is how history becomes a mirror, revealing that the unseen climate of mind and feeling governs the visible world of achievement and wealth. This is where personal application lies. As you learn that by cultivating a wealth atmosphere, you step into the same invisible law that has guided some of the most successful lives ever lived. This is why examples of wealth atmosphere in history are not just stories, they are blueprints, demonstrating the timeless principle that internal climate shapes external reality with unerring precision. Ask yourself what happens when you try to force abundance or pretend feelings you do not genuinely inhabit, and notice how the subconscious resists, revealing the pitfalls most people encounter when attempting to create a wealth atmosphere. This is how it unfolds, because Neville emphasized that atmosphere must be authentic, and any effort rooted in desperation, pretense, or impatience will fail to impress the subconscious effectively. This is where the illusion deepens. For many believe repeating affirmations or visualizing outcomes is sufficient, yet without congruent feeling, the subconscious discards the attempt as meaningless. This is why it matters, because awareness of these mistakes prevents wasted effort and accelerates mastery, showing you the difference between real atmospheric cultivation and superficial imitation. This is the turning point, as understanding errors allows you to refine your practice, ensuring that each moment spent creating an atmosphere of wealth is potent, deliberate, and emotionally charged. This is how subtle sabotage occurs, where underlying fear, doubt, or impatience can quietly poison the intended atmosphere, neutralizing its influence before it ever impresses the subconscious. This is where patience and honesty become essential, because detecting internal resistance is the first step toward neutralizing it and restoring clarity to your inner climate. This is why consistency outweighs intensity, as occasional bursts of feeling cannot override the habitual atmosphere that dominates the subconscious on a daily basis. This is how overthinking undermines the process, for excessive mental analysis can fracture feeling, turning a potentially powerful impression into scattered, ineffective energy. This is where neglecting the present moment falters, since the subconscious responds to the atmosphere you inhabit now, not to imagined states you promise yourself for tomorrow or next week. This is why imitation is dangerous, because mimicking behaviors without generating the authentic internal climate results in hollow gestures that the subconscious ignores. This is how misalignment manifests, as people attempt manifestation while unconsciously broadcasting doubt, fear, or scarcity, which produces the very outcomes they wish to avoid. This is where clarity becomes critical, for understanding that atmosphere is the substrate of all creation allows you to identify and correct missteps quickly and efficiently. This is why subtle calibration matters, as even minor inconsistencies between feeling and intention can dilute the power of the atmosphere you are trying to cultivate. This is how mastery emerges, when you recognize and eliminate these common mistakes, aligning thought, feeling, and mood into a coherent, magnetic aura. This is where reinforcement is key, because the subconscious requires repetition and immersion in authentic atmosphere to overwrite old patterns and establish new defaults. This is why patience, honesty, and emotional congruence are non-negotiable, as skipping these principles invites error and prolongs manifestation. This is how the ordinary transforms, as avoiding these mistakes allows your atmosphere to flow naturally, influencing both subconscious impressions and external outcomes effortlessly. This is where true progress lies, for mastering the cultivation of atmosphere is less about doing more and more about refining, deepening, and sustaining the quality of the feeling you allow to dominate your inner world. This is why understanding common mistakes is essential, because it illuminates the invisible barriers that sabotage creation, ensuring your practice of atmospheric mastery is precise, effective, and unstoppable. Envision a life where the feeling of abundance, confidence and sufficiency is not fleeting but constant, flowing through every thought, word, and action. And understand that sustaining a wealth atmosphere is the key to long-term manifestation. This is how it unfolds, because Neville taught that the subconscious requires repetition and consistency. A temporary feeling leaves no lasting impression, whereas a sustained atmosphere becomes the blueprint for reality itself. This is where the illusion deepens, for many people create a temporary aura of wealth, only to fall back into old patterns of scarcity, frustration, or doubt, undermining their own progress. This is why it matters, because without sustained atmosphere, manifestation becomes sporadic, results are inconsistent, and the subconscious receives mixed signals that confuse reality itself. This is the turning point, as deliberate strategies for maintenance, such as daily feeling exercises, visualization, and conscious mood checks, ensure the atmosphere remains potent and unbroken. This is how momentum builds, because every day spent immersed in the chosen state strengthens the subconscious impression, gradually transforming it from a temporary experiment into a permanent internal climate. This is where subtle reinforcement proves essential, for small reminders, triggers, and habits can keep your atmosphere aligned, even during challenges, distractions, or stress. This is why internal vigilance is crucial, because sustaining wealth atmosphere is not passive. It requires mindful monitoring of feelings, thoughts, and energy to prevent drift into scarcity or doubt. This is how alignment deepens, as each moment spent consciously inhabiting abundance reinforces the subconscious, ensuring the external world mirrors the internal state consistently. This is where ordinary days become laboratories, testing your ability to maintain atmosphere in mundane activities, interactions, and decisions, proving that mastery is woven into everyday life rather than extraordinary events. This is why persistence triumphs over intensity, because steady, sustained feeling imprints far more deeply than sporadic bursts of imagined wealth. This is how subtle habits multiply, as each practice compounds, maintaining the atmosphere even when conscious attention wanes, like gravity guiding a river along its course. This is where adaptability becomes key, because sustaining atmosphere also requires adjusting to life's changing circumstances without letting them disrupt your internal climate. This is why emotional congruence matters, for feeling aligned with your desired state in every small moment ensures the subconscious remains fully impressed and obedient to your chosen reality. This is how effortless manifestation emerges, as the subconscious, continually saturated with the wealth atmosphere, begins to orchestrate outcomes automatically, without struggle or conscious coercion. This is where internal authority asserts itself, for sustained atmosphere signals to the subconscious that this is now the permanent state of being, leaving no room for doubt or scarcity to reclaim control. This is why the daily rituals of feeling, mood checks, and visualization are not optional, but essential infrastructure for a life of abundance and effortless manifestation. This is how subtle mastery crystallizes, because the more consistently the atmosphere is maintained, the more the subconscious aligns every thought, action, and circumstance with the internal reality you have chosen. This is where life begins to flow predictably, magnetized by the aura of wealth you sustain, and the world becomes a reflection of the powerful, abundant climate cultivated within. This is why sustaining your wealth atmosphere is not just a technique, it is the invisible architecture of creation, the ongoing impressing of the subconscious, and the foundation of a life designed from the inside out. Picture for a moment the transformative power of gratitude, not as a fleeting feeling, but as a pervasive atmosphere that saturates your consciousness, reshaping the way the subconscious perceives reality and magnetizes abundance. This is how it unfolds, because Neville taught that feelings, when fully embraced and sustained, impress the subconscious more powerfully than thought, intention, or action alone. And gratitude is one of the most potent of all feelings. This is where the illusion deepens, for most people view gratitude as a polite acknowledgement or a checklist item, failing to understand that it is a dynamic force capable of altering internal climate and external experience alike. This is why it matters, because a sustained atmosphere of gratitude signals sufficiency, completeness, and abundance to the subconscious, which then orchestrates life to reflect that state automatically. This is the turning point, as consciously cultivating gratitude shifts attention from lack and limitation to the richness already present, creating fertile soil for all desires to grow. This is how subtle alchemy occurs, for the feeling of gratefulness amplifies positive moods, diminishes fear, and strengthens the impression upon the subconscious that abundance is the natural state of life. This is where ordinary experiences become extraordinary, because gratitude reframes perception, transforms interactions, and opens the door for opportunities that previously went unnoticed or inaccessible. This is why consistency is crucial, as the subconscious requires repeated immersion in this atmosphere for it to become dominant, internalized, and self-reinforcing. This is how effortless magnetism develops, since the subconscious, saturated with the vibration of gratitude, aligns events, people, and circumstances to sustain and expand the feeling. This is where external resistance dissolves, because life responds to the atmosphere created internally, and an aura of gratitude cannot be denied or contradicted by circumstance. This is why subtle practice matters, as even brief moments of deeply felt gratitude contribute to building a stable, unshakable climate of abundance within. This is how mastery deepens, for gratitude, when combined with other aspects of atmosphere cultivation, amplifies their effect and solidifies the subconscious impression of wealth, sufficiency, and ease. This is where emotional resonance asserts itself, because the more genuine the feeling, the more persuasive it is to the subconscious, and the stronger the external alignment becomes. This is why daily immersion is non-negotiable, as the subconscious does not distinguish between artificial or fleeting acknowledgement and deeply lived experience. This is how the ordinary becomes magnetic, as gratitude transforms mundane moments into reflections of abundance, feeding back into the inner state and strengthening manifestation. This is where alignment becomes effortless, because the subconscious, impressed by a continual stream of grateful feeling, begins to organize reality in harmony with the aura you maintain. This is why Neville emphasized feeling over form, for gratitude is more than a thought. It is an atmosphere that reshapes perception, magnetizes outcomes, and cements abundance as the internal default. This is how the invisible architecture of reality is reinforced, for each moment spent in gratitude impresses the subconscious and structures external circumstances accordingly. This is where life flows seamlessly, as the atmosphere of gratitude transforms not only internal experience, but external reality into a consistent, abundant, and harmonious reflection of your chosen state. This is why cultivating the atmosphere of gratitude is a cornerstone of Neville's atmosphere technique, ensuring that abundance becomes not just imagined, but lived, embodied, and magnetically present in every aspect of life. Think of the moment when feeling, imagination, and atmosphere converge, forming a triad of creative power so potent that the subconscious can no longer distinguish between inner experience and external reality, and life begins to mirror the internal state effortlessly. This is how it unfolds, because Neville taught that each element, feeling, imagination, and atmosphere, is a distinct instrument, and when orchestrated together, they impress the subconscious with undeniable authority, producing rapid and consistent manifestation. This is where the illusion deepens, for most attempt to manifest by using only one element, thinking, visualizing, or acting, without integrating the full spectrum of experiential signals that the subconscious requires to align reality with intention. This is why it matters, because combining these elements creates a coherent, unbroken signal that saturates the subconscious, leaving no room for doubt, resistance, or contradictory impressions. This is the turning point, as mastery of this integration allows you to generate internal states so compelling that circumstances rearrange themselves automatically, effortlessly supporting your desires. This is how subtle mastery is achieved, because feeling provides emotional weight, imagination provides sensory depth, and atmosphere ensures consistency and pervasive influence over both subconscious and external environment. This is where ordinary attempts fail, as unintegrated practices produce weak or sporadic results, whereas the full triad ensures your subconscious receives a complete and convincing impression of reality as you wish it to be. This is why repetition and immersion are critical, as sustained engagement across all three elements solidifies the dominant state, making manifestation inevitable rather than accidental. This is how momentum compounds, because each rehearsal of feeling-infused imagination within a maintained atmosphere reinforces the subconscious impression, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of alignment and manifestation. This is where subtlety amplifies power, for the subconscious responds not to overt effort, but to the invisible coherence and intensity of combined internal signals. This is why deliberate integration matters, as each element alone has influence, but together they create a magnetic aura that draws people, opportunities, and circumstances into harmony with your internal state. This is how mastery evolves, as repeated practice of feeling, imagination, and atmosphere synchronizes mind, emotion, and energy into a unified frequency that resonates through all aspects of life. This is where ordinary reality transforms, because the subconscious treats the integrated internal experience as undeniable truth, prompting external events to match seamlessly. This is why internal alignment becomes effortless, as the triad produces a self-sustaining current of manifestation that does not require struggle or constant intervention. This is how subtle refinement produces extraordinary results, for each nuance of feeling, each imaginative detail, and each atmospheric adjustment compounds to strengthen the impression on the subconscious. This is where life begins to flow predictably, as people, resources, and opportunities naturally gravitate toward the frequency you maintain internally. This is why Neville's teaching is timeless, because it provides a systematic method for harnessing the triad of feeling, imagination, and atmosphere to impress the subconscious and create reality from the inside out. This is how confidence solidifies, as repeated success using the integrated method proves that reality is obedient to the internal state rather than external circumstance. This is where effortless creation manifests, because the subconscious, fully impressed and aligned, orchestrates life automatically, reflecting the coherent internal state outwardly and consistently. This is why combining feeling, imagination, and atmosphere is the ultimate demonstration of Neville's principle, producing rapid, reliable, and magnetic manifestation that transforms every aspect of existence. Envision a reality where the atmosphere you cultivate within yourself becomes the blueprint for every aspect of your life, where feeling, imagination, and inner climate converge to create limitless potential, and the subconscious responds as if this internal state is the absolute truth. This is how it unfolds, because Neville taught that atmosphere is not merely a tool for temporary manifestation, but a gateway to permanent transformation, allowing you to live from a state of abundance, power, and creative authority. This is where the illusion deepens, for most believe their circumstances are fixed or dictated by external forces, unaware that the invisible climate they maintain is silently orchestrating every event, interaction, and opportunity. This is why it matters, because understanding and mastering atmosphere gives you access to infinite creative potential, where life becomes a mirror of the state you sustain internally, rather than a reflection of external limitation. This is the turning point, as realizing that every thought, feeling, and habitual mood contributes to the dominant atmosphere empowers you to consciously choose the reality you wish to inhabit. This is how subtle mastery extends, because when atmosphere is continuously impressed upon the subconscious, it transcends temporary manifestation and establishes a permanent internal architecture that guides every aspect of life effortlessly. This is where ordinary experience transforms, as even challenges, obstacles, and uncertainties bend to the dominant state of mind and feeling you maintain, creating opportunities where none seem to exist. This is why deliberate cultivation of atmosphere is essential, for every sustained feeling of abundance, confidence, and sufficiency reinforces the subconscious blueprint that governs external reality. This is how momentum becomes infinite, as each repetition, meditation, and practice compounds, amplifying the magnetic pull of your chosen internal state. This is where subtlety wields power, because the subconscious obeys the silent, pervasive signal of atmosphere more faithfully than any external action or spoken intention. This is why the law of feeling is supreme, as life aligns with the state you inhabit internally, producing outcomes that reflect your dominant climate without exception or delay. This is how alignment becomes effortless. For once the subconscious is saturated with the atmosphere of your desired reality, creation occurs automatically, predictably and abundantly. This is where empowerment crystallizes, because mastery of atmosphere grants the ability to shape life from the inside out, unbound by circumstance, opinion, or external resistance. This is why persistence matters, as continuous maintenance of a chosen internal climate cements the subconscious impression, ensuring that your aura of abundance becomes permanent and self-reinforcing. This is how limitless potential manifests, for there is no ceiling to what can be attracted, created, or experienced when your inner atmosphere consistently radiates the frequency of your desires. This is where life becomes a canvas, because your sustained internal climate paints every interaction, opportunity, and experience in perfect alignment with abundance, fulfillment, and ease. This is why Neville's principle remains timeless, as the infinite potential of atmosphere demonstrates that reality is not fixed. It is the obedient reflection of the internal state you cultivate and maintain. This is how subtle genius is revealed, because those who master atmosphere can shape life effortlessly, magnetizing wealth, love, opportunity, and success without struggle. This is where freedom emerges fully, as the invisible power of sustained atmosphere allows creation at the speed, scale, and quality of your choosing. This is why embracing the infinite potential of atmosphere is the ultimate demonstration of Neville's teaching, unlocking the unseen architecture of reality and allowing life to bend in harmony with the state you inhabit.